The night it happened was the kind of cold that crept under your collar and made your bones ache. The kind that turned breath into fog and hope into something fragile. If you've ever wondered how one small decision can change many lives forever, stay with this story until the end, because what happened next will remind you why kindness still matters in this world. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because these are the stories that deserve to be shared. Mark Harris was used to the cold, not because he liked it, but because life hadn't given him much choice. He was a struggling single dad, waking up before dawn every day to stack shelves at a grocery warehouse, coming home exhausted to a tiny apartment that smelled of instant noodles and worn-out dreams. His hands were always rough, his back always sore, and his heart always divided between worry and love for his 8-year-old son, Liam. Liam was his whole world. Since Mark's wife had passed away 3 years earlier from a sudden illness, the apartment had felt quieter, heavier, like the walls themselves were grieving. Every night, Mark would sit on the edge of Liam's bed, brushing his hair back, promising him that everything would be okay, even when he wasn't sure it would. Money was always tight, bills stacked up like silent threats on the kitchen table, the heater barely worked, and Mark often wore his jacket indoors just to keep warm. But no matter how hard things got, he never let Liam see him break. He smiled through the stress, laughed at Liam's jokes, and told him stories about brave heroes who never gave up. Maybe it was because Mark needed to believe those stories himself. One evening, after a double shift that left his legs trembling, Mark took a shortcut home through a dimly lit street near the old bus terminal. Snow had begun to fall, soft but relentless, coating the sidewalks in white. As he walked, he noticed a shape near the entrance of a closed storefront, a figure curled up against the wall. At first, he thought it was a bundle of trash or someone sleeping off a bad night. Then the figure moved. It was a girl, a teenager, no older than 17, wearing a thin jacket that was far too small for the weather. Her hair was tangled, her face paled, and her arms were wrapped around her stomach as if she were trying to hold herself together. When she looked up, her eyes were wide with fear and exhaustion. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, his voice cautious but gentle. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Yeah, broken bar, I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered. "They kicked me out. I'm pregnant." Mark felt his chest tighten. He glanced around the empty street, the snow falling harder now. He thought about his empty apartment, the thin walls, the lack of money, the responsibility already weighing on him. Every practical thought screamed that he couldn't afford this. But then he looked at her again, at the way she shivered, at the way she hugged her belly like it was the only thing keeping her alive, and something inside him shifted. He thought of Liam. He thought of his wife. He thought of all the nights he had prayed for help when he felt alone. And before fear could stop him, he said the words that would change everything. "You can come with me, at least for tonight." Her name was Emily. She barely spoke as they walked to Mark's apartment, her steps slow and careful. When they arrived, Liam was already asleep, curled up with his stuffed bear. Mark made Emily a cup of hot tea, gave her an old blanket, and let her sit on the couch. She cried silently as she warmed her hands, tears of relief more than sadness. That night, Mark lay awake on the floor beside Liam's bed, staring at the ceiling. He wondered what he had gotten himself into. He worried about money, about space, about what people would say. But beneath all that worry was a quiet sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The days that followed were not easy. Emily was withdrawn at first, flinching at loud noises, apologizing for everything. She told Mark her story in pieces. Her parents had thrown her out when they found out she was pregnant. The baby's father had disappeared the moment things got real. She had bounced between friends' couches until there were no more couches left. Mark didn't judge her. He didn't lecture her. He simply listened. He gave her rules, the simple ones. She had to help around the apartment as much as she could, and she had to take care of herself and the baby. In return, she had a roof over her head and a place where no one would yell at her. Liam took to Emily almost immediately. He would sit beside her on the couch, asking innocent questions about the baby. "Can it hear us? Do you think it will like dinosaurs?" Emily would smile for the first time in days, her hand resting on her belly, her eyes softening. There were hard moments too, medical appointments they could barely afford, nights when Emily cried from fear and hormones and uncertainty, days when Mark skipped meals so there would be enough food for everyone, but they faced it together, forming an unlikely family stitched together by kindness and survival. When Emily went into labor, Mark was the one who rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding like it had when Liam was born. He held her hand through the pain, telling her she was strong, that she could do this. When the baby finally arrived, a tiny girl with a powerful cry, Emily sobbed with relief and joy. She named her Grace. Life didn't magically become easier after that. If anything, it got harder. Sleepless nights multiplied. Expenses grew. Mark took on extra shifts, his body aching, his spirit tested. But there was laughter in the apartment now. There was warmth. There was purpose. Years passed. Emily grew into herself. With Mark's encouragement, she finished school, studying late into the night after Grace was asleep. She worked part-time, saving every dollar she could. Mark treated her not like a burden, but like a daughter. He taught her how to budget, how to stand up for herself, how to keep going when life felt overwhelming. Liam grew too, learning compassion by watching his father. He learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about showing up. Eventually, Emily moved out into a small place of her own, tears in her eyes as she hugged Mark. "You saved my life," she whispered. Mark shook his head. "You saved your own," he said. "I just opened the door." They stayed close, birthdays, holidays, milestone as all shared. Mark never expected anything in return. Helping Emily had simply felt like the right thing to do. Then, one afternoon many years later, Mark received a letter in the mail. By then, his hair was graying, his body slower, but his heart just as steady. He opened the envelope at the kitchen table, expecting another bill. Instead, it was an invitation. Emily was graduating from medical school. Mark sat down, overwhelmed. He remembered the scared girl and the cold, the teenager with nowhere to go. He remembered the nights of doubt and sacrifice. Tears blurred his vision as he read the words again and again. At the graduation ceremony, Emily spotted Mark in the crowd and broke down in tears. When she spoke, she told her story not of hardship, but of kindness. She told everyone about the struggling single dad who took her in when he had nothing to spare, about how his belief in her had carried her through the darkest moments. Afterward, she handed Mark a small envelope. Inside was a letter and a check enough to pay off his remaining debts and finally fix the heater in his apartment. "You're my miracle," Mark said, his voice shaking. Emily smiled through her tears. "No," she replied, "you're mine." Sometimes miracles don't come in grand gestures or sudden riches. Sometimes they come in the form of a cold night, an open door, and a choice to care when it would be easier not to. If this story moved you even a little, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, because somewhere out there, someone is standing in the cold, waiting for a miracle, and maybe this story will remind us that we can be one.